All right. Well, it's 3 minutes past, according to my handy dandy iPhone. So um, let's get started. I will just go ahead and introduce myself. I am Kelly White. I'm the Executive Vice President of T3 Talent. And I work within the organization of T360. We're a management consulting company specific to the residential real estate industry. And T3 Talent, we actually help companies make key hires and we help candidates make career transitions. And so we work with clients in all of the different parts of the industry, whether it's brokerages, franchise companies, MLS association, technology, so kind of the gamut. And we also do not only executive recruiting, but we also do staffing. And so really my role in this in the mastermind group is to help with any hiring situations that you might have, teach hiring, talk about hiring. I know currently in this market, you may not be hiring, but we can talk about really anything employee related or onboarding or anything with the people on your team. So I might just pause a moment here and ask Mara and Ryan, are there any special requests that you might have that we want to talk about today? Are either one of you making key hires anytime soon?
I mean, I go back and forth with the virtual assistant versus an in-person assistant. And, I'm taking Chirag's coaching with my team, but I've taken other coaching, and there seems to be a disconnect with where people are in their ability to hire, where you don't hire a separate marketing person. You hire a separate marketing person, you hire a separate assistant, you hire a separate showing, that's great if I was a trust fund baby and
right.
I'm not. So, it's just not feasible. And I had an assistant and he left for another career after a couple of years with me in the middle of the pandemic. And I just haven't hired anybody since. And I've talked to a couple of the virtual assistant companies, and I think there's some really great aspects to it. And certainly cost is one of them.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I mean, just today, I got off Kate's coaching call and hopped onto this one, just talking about this printed collateral that needs to be put together and printed out and presented at your open houses. Well, I'm not doing that. Like, I want it to be done, but
you don't want to do it.
I won't do it well. I mean, I'm just not a designer, and so then I would outsource that versus having an in-person, but that's a marketing person, but I also need an assistant sewing assistant. So just kind of a little bit of a disconnect on a lot of these, how on a lot of the coaching calls with hiring a bunch of separate people. It's just not feasible right now.
Okay, good. Well, we'll talk about that. Maybe I can offer some suggestions at least.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I totally get where you're coming from. How about you, Ryan? I know we've met before, and so what's on your mind? Anything?
No, a lot of the same things for Mara. Still in the same position. Last year was a down year after having the best year of my career.
Right.
And so some of the mindset is there of, I'm not fearful of bringing somebody on. We did bring in an assistant before, and I definitely take responsibility for not being prepared and having structures and systems in place to make them successful. But in reality, when I look backwards, that's what I needed. And I had probably hired the wrong person, even though they were a great personality and culture fit, but they didn't have the skill set to come in and just take charge. And so I'm fighting a lot of the same personal demons that Mara referenced, is that I have a lot of great ideas, but I'm not good at executing. And so I do need to have somebody more like a director of operations that just doesn't want to use this as a stepping stone and be here 6 months or 12 months and gone to bigger and better things. But at the same time, you still have to, if with the ups and downs and learning how to better manage and create consistent, steady commissions and income so that you can still write that check every week. So it's still that internal battle that's been going on for a couple of years of, yes, you need to hire an assistant or director of operations first, and then you can better expand my team, which we haven't yet because I've realized that and been real with myself. So still trying to just put that all into play, because to her point, I can do this stuff, but it may take me a half a day to do something. It would take somebody else 30 minutes. And that's very much a waste of time if you're supposed to be the rainmaker.
Yeah, I relate 100%. Okay, thank you for sharing. So we're going to go through a couple things, and I see we've gotten Nicole to join as well. So hi, Nicole. We have a small group, which I love. So we're going to do some individualized attention. Is there anything around the hiring, staffing, any kind of people things that you want us to address? Otherwise, we'll kind of work with Mara and Ryan, and we'll do parts of my presentation, but really the idea is to try to customize what you all really need right now. Nicole? Oh, she's unmuting. Hi, Nicole.
Hi guys, how are you?
We're great. How are you?
Wonderful. So it's a great question. We currently have a director of ops, and then we have videography on staff. And I think that my business partner and I are thinking about having the next 2 hires over the next like 12 to 18 months be potentially an ISA role, and then we're debating what that next hire is. So any sort of direction that you guys have, we'd be willing to listen to.
Okay, great. So perfect. Okay. With all of that context, I'm going to just kind of move through. Most of y'all have seen part of this presentation, so I'm going to not go through the whole presentation. I'm going to remind briefly for those that might not have been on this call. I know Ryan has been. I'm not sure about Nicole and Mara. These are the things that I reference as it relates to the hiring process. And so I say there's a 10-step process, and we've been working through each of these steps. And so I think there's some of these that we probably might be relevant for you all today. The idea was to talk about finding candidates and pre-screening, and really maybe hone in a little bit on the job description and the talent profile, which I think those things could play very nicely with some of the questions that we have. So I'm gonna move us into the completing the job description part, and then we can really talk about some of the things that have come up that all 3 of you have mentioned. So I'll just ask the question first, which is, how many of you think that you have a well-developed job description as it relates to, I mean, maybe this is more of a Mara and a Ryan question, because they've been working to find their next key hire that's going to keep them into their leveraged activities and get them out of the administrative sort of, things that keep them from being more dollar productive activities. So Mara and Ryan, how do you feel that your job descriptions are? Do you feel like you have a fairly well-defined job description for what you want that person to do?
No, but I haven't even attempted it yet.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I have one and it's bad. I just haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay. Yeah, no, totally get it. How about you, Ryan? We may have lost Ryan. Okay. So let's start with, and I can also, Nicole, bring in a little bit of what you're talking about. But so the first thing we want to do is think about, and what I see a lot of times is just sort of like a litany, like a list of like 100 or 200 things that a person's supposed to do, because what I think tends to happen, understandably, is like people just get stuff out of their brain and put it on a piece of paper. But I think what's really important on the front end is, what does this individual in this role need to do in order for them to pay for themselves? Right. So in theory, if you're going to be hiring the executive assistant or an operations person, even though they're not revenue producing, you should actually be able to leverage your time in order to produce more business. Otherwise, you could just stay at the level that you're at. And so sometimes, my own self included, I'm a very high individual performer. And so there may be a little bit of a shift when you're bringing the person on and you're training them, right? So like you're going to be in the training and the hiring mode, which means your production might stay the same. But the idea is that you're going to hire someone that will be able to take things away from you, so that way you can go focus on increasing the business. So you, number one, want to start with, what would that person be doing and how? So we call it a KPI, which is a key performance indicator. And that's like, what is the specific thing that they need to do that's going to help you then be able to go do what you need to do? So let's talk about that with an executive assistant. So there's a couple of people on the call that are looking for the next executive assistant. Or I even think that if you're in a team and you're just, let's just say you're a team and you're just making your one hire that you have, because kind of the executive assistant, unless you have more than one person on the team, to your point, Mara, they need to be able to be capacity enough to be able to do some of the marketing, some of the calendar work. Like, you have to find a sort of a multifaceted executive assistant that has enough capacity to do a variety of different things until you have the revenue and, really the desire, if you will, to then say, okay, now let's separate out these roles. Because have you all ever heard of the term cul-de-sac talent versus capacity? Anyone? I use this language, the cul-de-sac, if you think about it, like the cul-de-sac talent is maybe somebody think they just like drive into a cul-de-sac and it ends. And it's a similar with finding someone who has multiple capacity, not just somebody who can do one specific thing. And so the first part of this is just getting clarity on what are the top 3 things that will move the needle for you if you have this person doing that. Anybody want to offer any ideas about what that might be and the roles that they're looking for? I mean, I can also share, but I mean, sometimes it might be good. Like, what do you think that someone would be doing in your organization that's going to free you up, that would produce more business for you if you can go do it? It sounds like both Mara and Ryan have both referenced some marketing, and I got someone new. Hi, Corey.
Hello.
Hello.
Making the appointments.
Yes. Okay. So if you had somebody and you were writing a job description, the KPI is only key performance indicator. That's all it is. So a key performance indicator, what's the role that you're thinking of? Is it inside sales or inside sales associate? Corey?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So the idea on the KPI would be for them to make X number of appointments. That, I mean, you can make it very general, X number of appointments per week, X number of appointments per month, X number of appointments per year, whatever that might be. Or you could say X number of appointments that convert to a face-to-face buyer appointment or something like that, where like they're also attached to like making sure that that person shows up to the actual buyer's appointment or whatever appointment it is that they're trying to set. I mean, you could even do that with a recruiter, which is a recruiter needs to set so many appointments with recruits per week, per month, per year, whatever, and then be able to convert those. Does that make sense? So if you really just did nothing else on a job description, but you were very clear about like, these are the top 3 things that will move the needle in this role where then I can produce more, then what that allows you to do is, number 1, it narrows the needle in the haystack that you're looking for when you go out to try to find candidates, but it also helps you when they start because they already know that pretty much every conversation that you have with them is going to be on those 3 KPIs. How many appointments did you have? What was the conversion? What happened? Because you kind of don't care about the other stuff. Yeah, they need to do it. But ultimately, whatever the roles and responsibilities are, in theory, should drive the key performance indicators. And so that allows you to be very hyper-focused and making sure. And then it's easy because those of us who are super busy, individual top performers, gosh, we don't want to look at 10 things to try to have to measure if the person's doing their role or not. We just want them to do the top 3 things that are going to move the needle for us. So is that helpful? I'm going to like pause for a breath here and see if there's questions just like on initially defining kind of what that person's going to be doing. Because I see a whole litany of things where there's no way that the person has any clue what's going to really move the needle. You want to focus them on the things that are going to move the needle for you. Any questions there? Comments? Nope. Okay. All right. And then the other thing after you say like, these are the top 3 things, this is a really important one. I think probably Mara, this might be good for you as you start thinking about who it is that you really want. And I think sometimes titles are important because titles really are attached to things that people do. But when you're thinking about an executive assistant, if it's your first hire, think a little more broadly than you might otherwise think, right? So like with Mara, I think that, Mara and Ryan referenced marketing materials. So if you have a capacity executive assistant, then some capacity executive assistants know how to use Canva, right? And so I have a capacity executive assistant, and I've had one for a long time, where when I have basic marketing, then she can do that in Canva. Like, I don't have to outsource that to a graphic artist. So like, for example, she did this presentation in Keynote. Is this the greatest presentation ever? Probably not, but it's far better than I could do. So number one, key point, I'm not doing it. Thank God. And then number two, I don't have to outsource it to a graphic artist. And so can you find someone who has the basic capacity? And you may have to give them some runway to learn Canva, but Canva is a free tool. And I don't get paid by Canva. I know that Compass has great tools. So it's just a matter of somebody who has the capacity to get in and is willing to learn, and that you guys more than likely have the eye and the content of how you want it to look and things like that, just like I do here. So once you've nailed that down, then the next question, and this is, I think, where a lot of people miss, is who can actually then do that job, right? So if I say like capacity talent, what does that really mean? In my mind, if I were to go out and look for candidates that are capacity talent, I'm going to be looking for somebody who has, especially if it's your first hire and you want an executive assistant that's going to be very multi-capacity, you're going to be looking for people who have experience. And it may be generally, but can you, and I think you can, I have, find someone who they've done a little bit of marketing, they've done maybe some basic operations, they know how to use the basic tools, Gmail and tech and those kinds of things. And maybe have a little bit of, if they have some domain knowledge in the residential real estate industry, then I think you're lucky. But I think if you can find people that have had sort of that broad scope of, they've done executive work, they've done project management, they've done a little bit of operations, maybe done flyers or a little bit of marketing here and there. It's hard to get through really any jobs these days without having a little bit of that, because it's just, these days, it's in every job, you have to do some parts of that. So broaden out your talent profile. Who can actually do that job? And one thing I say often, you'll hear is, and this is from my own personal experience, I relate to y'all so much, is remember, we're in a deadline driven, high intensity, 100% commission world, right? So not everybody can be working in those environments. And I always say, like, this is such any role that you're bringing onto your organization, I say you're looking for the top 5% of talent. So not everybody's going to be able to do this. And sometimes because we're in it all the time, we don't remember that not everybody is good at operating in high intensity, deadline driven environments, right? So like, honestly, if you can find the person that can do that, then, and look for just the basic skill set, you're doing well. So like, remember in your talent profile, that's what you're looking for. Is the person tenacious? I love this term and I'm learning it, and I realize like it's really not a skill that everyone has. And so you sometimes have to teach it, is the skill of managing up. Do y'all know what managing up is? Okay. Basically what this means is that those people that you hire are supposed to be managing you. And so, especially like an executive assistant, they should really be kind of telling you what to do, right? They should be looking at your calendar. They should be reminding you. They should be project leading. And so managing up is making sure that whomever that you report to is on track and knows what you're doing, right? Because often what I find is that when you have somebody that's working for you and you find yourself managing them, then they may not be the right fit. And it may just be that, or you haven't trained them to a certain degree, so there's always that like dynamic of, did I train them, not train them? Are they the right person, not the right person? But you want to look for somebody who knows how to manage up or can learn how to manage up. And sometimes indicators of that might be people who've done a lot of project management or project coordination, those kinds of things, because then they're going to keep you on track versus you keeping them on track. So I like writing a narrative here with what is the talent profile? Like, what are the top 5 things you want in someone? Like, one I like is tenacious, driven, ambitious, motivated, And you know what? I don't care if it's an EA or anything on my team, right? Because the way that it is like, those are key things to me. So make sure you identify the 5 things you want. This is an easy way to do it, or the 5 things that you would like to avoid, right? So somebody who's slow, or somebody who's not quick, or somebody who's a victim mentality. Like, you can really watch for the victim mentality when you start to interview. So that's really the candidate profile, is knowing what you really want and looking for the skill base that you need. So do you need them to have operations or marketing or whatever that might be? So I'm going to take a breath there. Any questions just around kind of identifying the job or identifying who the best person is? Oh, okay. All right, Mara, did we take care of you and Ryan?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's some things. I call these the validation, which is, what training does that person need to have? Any specific kind of training? Do they, like in our environment, we use Salesforce. So if they know how to use Salesforce, or they've had Salesforce training, that's good. If you have a set of core values, then that is a way to really distinguish whether or not people want to go to work for you or not. What are the attitudes? Do they need leadership experience? Like, what kind of overall experience do you want? And then kind of, what is their overall natural behavior? Remember, when you're the individual performer and you're hiring your first assistant, this is a key point that I just don't want to forget to say, is often when we interview people, we automatically like the people that are like us. And when we're interviewing, if we don't have a structure for interviewing that's pretty tight, then you're going to gravitate to the people that you like. And the people that you like have, people like us on this call, we're the lead generators. We're the ones that like to go out and drive the business and do all that. So if you're attracted generally to somebody, they might be like you, while the executive assistants that you start to interview, they're going to be a different natural behavior than you. That's the whole point. Right? Is like, you're trying to complement your skills and behavior with the skills and behavior of who you bring on your team. And so while we might be the drivers and the, charismatic influence, inspiring people, the assistants or the operations people we want to come in. Yeah, we want them to be able to work with people, but they're going to need pretty much a high level of detail orientation, and they're going to feel different to you. So you don't naturally like them, for lack of better words. Like, we gravitate, probably all 5 of us, if we got together, we'd be like chatting up a storm. And then when you start kind of interviewing people that are different than your natural behavioral style, it just feels different. And so you don't naturally identify that you like them. And so it's really important to just know, like, okay, I'm hiring my assistant. They're intentionally going to be a different natural behavior. And so one thing with the person that I work with, and we always laugh about this all the time, and we're learning, I've worked with her for a really long time, but one thing I know about her, because of her natural behavioral style, is she literally interprets what I ask her to do. And there's a lot of times that it's actually not a literal interpretation, but I notice when she comes back in the questions that she's asking, that she's like literally interpreted what I've said. And so then I can work on ways of how I can communicate that to her, so that then she's more effective, instead of her coming back and forth. I'm like, oh yeah, she does literal interpretations, and I tend to be more higher level, and I'm not a literal interpretation person. Does that make sense? Anything strike a chord there for anybody?
I very much need an interpreter.
Yes. Don't you feel like you need I totally understand that. Because you feel like you're speaking 2 different languages sometimes, don't you?
I'm told that.
Yes. And so do you know what your natural behavior is? Like, have you done a behavioral profile or anything like that?
Like the Gallup strengths.
Yeah, the strengths
yeah.
finder.
Yes. Number 1, delegate.
Okay, gotcha. So I think when you know yours, it's always helpful, because then, it only takes one person to change a relationship. It's identifying how you're communicating with them that isn't working for them, versus like, I know my natural style is like, why don't they understand me? Like, I've said this 12 times. So like, but it is really funny. I'll tell a funny story here that, I don't know if y'all know Jack Miller, but Jack Miller is our CEO, and we've worked together in so many different capacities. But when I first started we worked at Keller Williams International together. And I ran Keller Williams University, and he ran the technology department. And I remember when he first started there, that it was the greatest thing ever, because I was trying to work with the individual website developers at the time. And I literally would I would say stuff that made such sense to me. And they would look at me as if, I mean, they had no idea what I was saying. And then they would say stuff back to me. And I was like, I have no idea what they're saying. And so when he got there, I remember saying, thank goodness I have the interpreter, because I feel like I'm English and they're speaking French. And it was like this whole thing. But I do think that it's a growing, anytime you're growing a team, and it's like our opportunity to grow as leaders is learning how to do all of that. But I totally relate with that. All of that, Nicole. All right, I'm going to stop and make sure we answer any questions that are remaining before I go into finding candidates, because sort of all of this is about making sure that we're clear about who and what. And I do think, Nicole, you had asked a question about how do you know maybe who to hire next, because you already have a team that has several people on it. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, and I think
Okay.
that the next hire we're in debate over. I
Okay.
think that the four, I guess the titles that we're debating between would be listing coordinator, executive assistant, showing assistant, or do we go virtual assistant because we're actively already interviewing for ISA?
Okay. So let me ask you this question. What is the challenge in your organization? What's the main obstacle?
Sure. So, and this is where we discuss often, is where are our biggest problems and what's kind of our biggest pain point. And there's a few of them. Not enough coverage for showings, spending too much money on agent commissions for a very quick covered showing.
Okay.
We're very high volume, especially in rentals. And a lot of our business is, hey, I need you to cover this one showing that I've already, toured the client for, and you just need to open the door. And we're paying out a significant amount of commission for that. I think that if it were my preference, I'd rather hire somebody on a salary to just have a showing assistant role. So that rather than having them reach a certain point in commissions, that's already defined and it doesn't exceed a certain point, and we're able to capture more of those dollars. But the other problem is also that we field so much more traffic than the average agent because our volume is between 800 to 1,000 transactions annually, that our email is just flooded. We have a lot of filters. I've actually given Zoom conferences on how much we've filtered our Gmail and hacked our Gmail so that so much of it is already filtered out, and that emails are filtering towards our team members for showing requests so that they bypass our email and are marked as read so that we don't even see them. But even still, with all of those things actively working, we're getting flooded with just so much activity that we have to respond to and read. And it's just too much that I know at least 50% of it I actually do not have to do myself. That somebody else is capable of doing for us. And a lot of it can be set up for our schedule if we got to a point where we could designate certain listings to certain days. And I think a portion of that could go to a VA, but not a large portion of it. And then another problem is because of the volume, we're in a position where there's so much activity with our listings going online, offline, updates, and all of that is currently with one person, with our director, that there's too much, and that role has been so gray because there's so much on her shoulders that I want to start breaking that into two roles and having one person designated to just listing coordination with having things go on market, off market, but then also handling active transactions, because sometimes things are having balls dropped within the transaction. So I think that's also
so my question to you then is, the piece where all of those emails are coming in, if you just had to guess, how much business are you missing out on because that's not being handled?
A significant amount.
Okay. So I think that's your answer. I mean, at least there's that piece of it, right? Which is, okay, we're missing out on, I don't know, 50, I mean, I don't know how much more revenue that we could be. And so then I think looking at that queue to start, which is are most of these something that needs somebody to convert, right? So your inside sales associate.
Mhm.
Are the majority of them things that need to be basically, for lack of better words, I would say coordinated out? Like, is it a place
Screened.
where, yeah, they need to be screened and then sent to the right person? Is that what I hear you saying? Not they need to be converted?
Sometimes they need to be screened for my business partner and myself and then sent out. We've gotten to the point where a lot of our team members who are on our listings, those emails are then forwarded to those team members.
Mhm,
So
that's good.
they're able to screen for them. But if it's our listing, we need to screen ourselves. But it's possible that one of our executive assistants, if we hired one, or an ISA, could do that for us.
Yeah, so I think just the general rule of thumb is any position that is a revenue producing position. If you're bringing any more revenue producers on, make sure that you have the operational admin system shored up first, right? Because what happens often is people add more revenue producers without having the actual support staff that they need. And so, like, I don't know that this we could talk about this for a whole hour, but I want to just give you like the rule of thumb, which is if you're adding revenue producers, make sure you have these support systems in place first. And then if you're missing revenue, if you have a revenue production that you're not managing, then that would be the secondary thing. I would see if I could find somebody who's a licensed person that can also do operations and executive assistant, because then they can also do your licensed showings if you needed them to.
So you think that the move is executive assistant?
I mean, and I just don't even really love using that language, but if you can find, I mean, even, I don't know, operations coordinator, someone who it denotes that they're doing project management and they're also licensed, so that way they can show, at least in the interim, it sounds like. And then the other thing I want to say that this might be helpful for all of you all, and this is what I think, Nicole, it came to me initially, and I'm happy to actually get on and show you how I do this at some point, Nicole, if it's helpful to you. But one thing is, when you are at a place where you're not sure what to hire next and you have multiple roles, as pedantic as this sounds, one thing that is important is to literally write out every single solitary thing that has to get done in the entire organization. So that then write out, I mean, I had a spreadsheet, I had a Google Doc where each person literally logged in all the things that they did. And then I could see operationally, like, here's gaps and this person shouldn't be doing this. And then it was easy to map out, like, this is how we could actually have this person do these things and like move some things under them and then move some things out and hire. So I don't know if that's helpful to you, but I think a mapping out of really what's going on in the organization is helpful before you start to just try to, like, throw a dart at something, other than knowing that if you've got so much revenue coming in and you don't have the support systems, then you need a support role. Most people have the opposite end. They have too much support and it's not the support that they need to go leverage themselves to be more productive, which I think might be the case where Mara is. Did that help you, or did that just confuse you?
I think it's validating. I think
I'm happy to show you what I do. You'll look at it and I mean, it's not my natural behavior, but my brain's logical, which is, okay, we need to get this all out so that we can see all the things, so that then we can decide like who does what and how do they do it, right? And I'm happy to grab a 30-minute call and show and tell if you want, Nicole. Just let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah. So really kind of the next thing today is we were going to talk about finding candidates. Is anyone at a point where they need to find candidates? Or Corey, tell us, I know Corey's eating, so she probably doesn't want to come off of mute and tell us her situation. But I want to try to be as helpful and supportive to you all on the call. We can talk about really any of these things. So anyone have a burning desire for what we do next? Otherwise, I can talk about how you find candidates.
Yeah, I kind of want to rewind. I forgot his name. He hopped off, so I can't.
Ryan.
So, I mean, he mentioned something which a couple of the virtual assistant companies really hit home.
Okay.
in their sales pitch is that, like I mentioned, I've had assistants before, and the last one for a couple of years left in the pandemic to switch careers. And so then I've been left kind of sort of hanging and then not really taking action to find a replacement or have, sporadically, and haven't really came across anybody. But the virtual assistant companies, they don't have a revolving door. Even if they did have a revolving door, they have a manager that knows your business, your people be done. And if that person who is beneath them and helping your team or you, they then can transition to the next person quite easily, versus an assistant that is in person. They don't want to be an assistant forever. And I've found they don't want to be one for much time at all. And so to put the time, energy, and effort into someone only to have them want to like leave a year or two later is a bit challenging. And that's where I'm kind of torn for this next initial hire between an assistant and a virtual assistant.
Yeah, I hear you. And I do know that there's like just some dynamics in the marketplace that are real. Like there's the facticity of, I came from the universe where people stayed at jobs. But my son is being taught in college, never stay at a job more than 2 years. So, it's like one of those things where you're like, okay, well, I get why they're saying that, but, the person that's with me has been with me for, 15 years in different jobs. Right. So I think there might be an opportunity, Mara, where, what is the long-term growth opportunity for someone in your organization? And there are people who actually, they only want to do executive work, executive assistant / operations work. Like that's what they want to do. And that's what they're good at. And so it's finding that person. And then I think sharing your world or making your world big enough or including them enough potentially for them to feel like, because I think that the person who has been with me for so long is like, she's kind of my work wife or whatever. Like, I don't really use that language, but like she's my right arm. Like I couldn't exist without her, basically. So how do you bring that in a way that validates them and wants them to continue to stay? So I don't know if there's some ways to think about that, Mara, that would be helpful. Because I feel like a residential real estate business is the best business that you could ever be in for a great executive assistant, because you're always going to need one. But so then what do you do with that person so that they feel like they're growing in their career, even though they're not maybe getting an increased title? They might be getting increased compensation, or you might offer perks to them that like they just can't get anywhere else, or I don't know, whatever that might be. I know somebody who his assistant just is pregnant and like he gave her a baby moon trip, right? Things like that bond people to you. So I don't know, or what do you think when I say that? Do you think there's a way that it could be more expansive when that person comes in, so that they know that like you and that person, once they prove themselves out, obviously are like a partnership that go together and that they're part of the long-term plan?
Yeah, the way you're saying it makes a lot of sense. I think the way that I've always looked at it and from my peers, colleagues, managers, is someone who's licensed and looking, who's just not making a lot of money yet and wants to be an assistant before they're an agent. And so just well, they want to become, right away, they want to become an agent. I've never really looked at solely going for an executive assistant. So therein lies a problem right there.
Gotcha. Well, you know what? That's really interesting, because the other thing too, that's so fascinating. Often though, the people that are going to be great in real estate, they can do sort of we're all a testimony to the fact that we can do the admin stuff when we need to, but that's not the highest and best use of our time. The idea is that like, there are people who, like the person that works with me, like she can do all this stuff 20 million times better than I can. Like, and I can do it acceptably, but like, she loves it. Like she loves all those things. Whereas I don't love them. So maybe that's a key point, Mara. There's like, how do we get you somebody? And in the interim, I think a virtual assistant's fine. you can totally start with the virtual assistant, because it sounds like there's a lot of overlap in terms of like they have capacity. If something goes wrong, you're going to have a replacement. But I would just say, I know a couple of really good virtual assistant companies. Make sure you ask around and you ask the right questions of other people who have used them, so that way you don't end up in the situation, which I've also heard, which is like, this is just not worth my time. And then it's a lot of stress and a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I've talked to a couple companies that Compass use and agents within Compass that use them. The one thing that I have heard is there's just a bit of a communication difference just by virtue of where they are in language. So if you wanted somebody to be communicating with clients and phone, email,
Yeah.
so there's been a bit of a disconnect, but the rest in terms of just baseline marketing and collateral things that I need done, I think it would make a lot of sense.
The only other thing I would say is, this is also not intuitive, and this might dissuade you, is you still have to onboard and train them, right? I think the dilemma is that people think you can get a virtual assistant and not train them.
Right.
And so if you're like me, which I think you probably are, people that are talking to my clients, they have to only talk to them and write to them a certain way. Just make sure that even if you get a virtual assistant, that you train them really the way that you would a regular assistant. They need to understand I like to call it conditions of satisfaction. They don't have to do it exactly the way you want to do it, but you need to say, this is the minimum acceptable standard that it has to happen. And then you have to watch and make sure it's happening before you just let loose of the paying attention. That's the hardest part, at least in my experience. I just hired a new person. And so I've just recently gone through this, and I forget, you need eyes on everything until they can do it to the level. It doesn't have to be to your level. It has to be the level of conditions that you say are the acceptable conditions.
Right.
And so then you're investing in that too, but that's okay. Or if you have it in writing, that's also helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay. Anything else? I guess we're at 45 minutes. I'm happy to go longer. Does anyone have any other questions? Do you want to talk about finding candidates today? Because if no one's finding candidates, you might want to wait, but I'm happy to talk about finding candidates too. I'm here for you.
I would actually be interested in hearing about this, because we are struggling to find agents, and then we're also struggling with candidates, and where we're currently looking for them is on Indeed and on LinkedIn. We have not used Wise Hire yet, because we noticed that the plan was about $199 per month. So if you have other recommendations, I would be open to hearing about them.
Okay, let's talk about it. Okay, so these are, these are the list of the things I use. And so the number one thing, I'll give you just a methodology. Number one, your number one source for finding anyone anywhere is in your network. And I'm sorry to say that that takes a little bit more work than just like putting something on Indeed or LinkedIn. But I will tell you right now, like I've done Indeed ads, I've done LinkedIn ads. Now I am going to share with you my success on LinkedIn and what you can do, but with ads, the ads to me I've stopped doing them altogether, because I cannot get the people that I need. So the number one thing is to start with, for lack of, I just literally, you can either do two things. You can just do old school, write down 250 people that you know in your network, and then start reaching out to them, because as soon as you start reaching out to your network, they will begin to give you names. So that's number one. The other way I do it, and I do this regularly, is I like to access my LinkedIn network, but I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So I look at my LinkedIn network and I start contacting the people in my LinkedIn network. And I would say something, I call it the who do you know who conversation, which is I'll reach out and be, hey, Nicole, it's Kelly from T360. How are you today? And then you'll be like, oh, it's great. And I'll say, listen, I'm expanding my team, and I'm looking for a top level executive assistant that can do minimally operations, project management, a little bit of marketing, and really just help me expand my business. Who do you know who that might be open to doing something like that really well? Who do you know? Anyone? And then if they go, oh, I can't think of anyone that's really looking for work, you say, well, do you know of any other business people that I might talk to that might be good connections that might know somebody. So you're just trying to, and I mean, the great thing, if you do this, you can change up how you go about it, because this is also could be your good sphere of influence prospecting. So like you can also, you have a full move with prospecting and actually accessing your network and asking for a key hire. So that's the number one way I do it. But then the next thing I do, you can see here that there's all these online job sites, which I've used. But the number one thing I do now, I'll share with you, is I only use LinkedIn as a tool. And I don't know, Nicole, if you have this or not, but you can actually get a recruiter license for the back end of LinkedIn. And so that's going to be less expensive than what you just said for the Wise Hire, which was, I think you said with the Wise Hire was like $199 a month.
Yeah.
You can get a license on LinkedIn. I think it's for like $175 a month, but there's a back end of LinkedIn that you can literally go in and you can search for very specific parameters. And so that is what I use all the time as a tool. And it will also show you the people who are open to work. So like if you're hiring all the time, and also, I mean, really, I think if you believe it or not, you can actually get, I just did this. You can get a list of real estate agents out of Broker Metrics, if you all use Broker Metrics, and then you can pull them into LinkedIn and you can communicate directly through LinkedIn to them. And you can do it because we don't do it in email because they just get blocked on spam. So there's a lot of ways that you can use LinkedIn. And then you'll also know, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I do a lot of LinkedIn posting, and it's not a lot, once a day I post, but I post openings that I have. And I've also just been building my LinkedIn network. And that's been a really huge thing that I have done, is really focusing on one tool. Because I think the other thing too is, at one point I was trying Indeed and I was using LinkedIn and, you know, all these different things. And I've really just invested in one tool, and LinkedIn seems to be the best one. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
But the people that you know are the best people to go to and ask for the executive assistant one, because they're going to know you and they're going to know the people. So I would say try to work your network for the best of but I do these. So when I work with clients, I do this exact methodology but like I call one warm prospecting and one cold prospecting. And I do them both, because sometimes I find people on LinkedIn that I would have no clue whatsoever. And you can actually, believe it or not, even with the free version of LinkedIn, you can search your own network for first level locations, some basic criteria. So you might try LinkedIn. And listen, I'm also open to show you what I do. So I'm happy to help do that. Any other thoughts there? Questions, comments, anything? Okay. Well, I think we're at the end of our time. So thank you all so much for hanging out this whole time. And hopefully we'll see you next time. And let's see, we're supposed to talk about, pre-screening. So next time we can talk about pre-screening, which, by the way, let me just say this. I'm pretty sure they have the job description, all those things, those templates somewhere in your learning platform through Chirag Shah. So don't do anything, or email me. Don't do stuff on your own. I have it. I'm Kelly at T360 if you need me. Like, I have all these things I'll share with you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.